Everybody. Welcome to At the Movies. It's 7 o'clock on Wednesday. And for some of you who got my emails and texts, you've watched like 5 hours of movies today until I finally got the right one that you were supposed to be watching. So we're going to be looking at Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, not the Temple of Doom. I sent you Temple of Doom. In my mind, I was thinking Last Crusade. It's operator error on my end, but we'll figure it out. If you didn't watch it, you have something to do tomorrow. You can go watch Last Crusade tomorrow. We're glad that everybody's here. What we're going to do tonight is at your table, and so I bet someone would love for Susan to come and sit at a table with y'all. At your table, share your name, what service you normally attend, and what's got your awe over the last 4 days. What's got your awe? What have you been awed by what God's been doing supernaturally through other people? But what's got your awe? Go for it.
We were like went to other service.
Well, my all was when that storm came. But he decided to he got my attention. We had that.
Yeah, we did.
And when I went out, over that storm.
Right there.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, we don't work up there. In fact, we live just about miles
A lot of times
How many?
I just knew I was
We have a big little colt, 6 months old, and it's time to go home. So I usually get a couple of guys to come up and help me because I can't really do it by myself.
All right, you have 30 seconds. All right, who wants to share an awe moment? Who wants to share an awe moment? Marianne, yes ma'am.
we all agree the tornado in Dallas is in awe because there was nobody killed.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, right? In such a concentrated population center.
And the help everybody's been trying to give each other.
Yeah. We give God glory and honor on that. Somebody over here?
Thank you, dear.
Yes ma'am.
It's I belong to a therapy group, and it's amazing how when you are interested and listening to another person with encouragement, how they can thrive under your eyes.
That's right. Very good. Thank you for sharing that. Marie? Who else has an awe moment? We can take time sharing. Who's got another awe moment? Yes, ma'am.
I have two.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
Yeah, you do.
So our daughter, who has been, we're in the midst of infertility treatment, and last week they had an embryo implanted. So
Okay.
we're waiting on positive news on that.
Yes.
And then I got a call today from a very good friend of mine whose daughter has been battling breast cancer for several years. She started in her late 20s, and she had 3 more tumors that popped up, and was undergoing chemo. And today she had a scan, and there's no tumors.
Hey,
Yeah.
praise the Lord. That is an all moment for sure.
For sure.
Who else has all moments? This table's got to have one.
I'm in all that I made it. I mean, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at home, and my mom at last minute, I was like, oh, they are having it tonight. There is 2 more weeks left.
Yes.
Mom, can you come over and put the kids to bed so I can go to Bible study? Sure.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I'm just, yeah.
We're glad you're here. We're glad, and mom or mother-in-law?
My mom.
Moms are awesome. And if you would have said mother-in-law, I would have said
Yeah,
mother-in-laws
they
are
both
awesome too. Other awes? Yes, sir.
We raise horses, and we have a little 6-month-old colt. And it was time to put a halter on. And so for days, I'd try to put the halter on, and he'd kind of let me put it over the nose. And when I'd get the strap over his neck, he'd just start pulling away. And he's big, and there wasn't any way I could get it on. So finally, I eat lunch at a little country store in Bluffdale, and there's some cowboys down there always, and I got 2 of them to come up and help me put a halter on, and got it on easy, and we put a rope on because it's good to let them drag a rope for a couple of days or more. And so went down and ate lunch. When I came back, he already had it off. So the next day, I went back down there to find them, and they were gone. Nobody was there. Couldn't find anybody to help me, so I went back up there, and I got another halter, and I just went out there and I thought, Lord, I need your help here, and I'm going to try to do this. And he came up there, and I put the halter over his nose, and he just kind of stood real still, and I reached over and grabbed the strap, and I figured, well, he's just going to pull away. And he sat there still, and I got that thing on there, and I went, thank you, Lord. That was my all moment.
That was your all moment. That's a good all moment. Any others? One of my awes is, as of today, we have about $350 raised for keeping the beard as opposed to $200 for shaving. The shavers, a lot of talk, no action. Got to pony up, y'all. That's my God moment. Pony up. Or I'm going to grow it longer and braid it. So if that's your motivation,
More money than pay, you gotta let
You'll
it
get
go
more
out.
money then, yeah.
that's my God.
Coming out of those pockets.
That's my motivation.
I
Yeah.
have a very sharp pair of scissors.
What'd you say, Janine? What'd you say?
I have a very sharp pair of scissors.
I had somebody at church today, someone on staff during the kids' time. They said, "Oh, we want you to keep the beard, but you got to get rid of those afro puffs over here." And I go, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Just let me get some scissors. I'll cut that off right now." I go, "Nope. That's part of the mystique or the motivation."
That's a mistake.
No, not mistake. Mystique. So whatever motivates you, give. All right. So it's a beard for Jesus, y'all. So y'all give for it. So
Moses comes to mind.
Moses, yeah. All right, Ann's going to open us in prayer, and then we're going to get going.
Gracious God, we're so grateful to be here tonight and to be able to see your awe in all the things around us. We thank you for all of this group and for the things that we'll learn tonight. And we just praise your name. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Ann. In all seriousness, one of the God moments is through this beard thing, and I'm being serious here, that we can do that and have fun with it. I think that's a sign of a good, healthy community, that we can use this as a way to poke loving fun with one another and challenge one another, and to be able to laugh in a group setting and not laugh at someone unless you were laughing at me, and then I completely missed that. So I think that's a God moment. So praise the Lord. So tonight we're going to watch 2 clips from Indiana Jones, And the last crusade, not the Temple of Doom. Temple of Doom has its own set of themes, but Last Crusade has some mystery. I think it's the most winsome of the Indiana Jones movies because of the relationship between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery and how they kind of act with one another. So there's two themes that we're really going to be looking at. One is the interaction between them both as father and son in the movie. And then the last scene, we're going to look at how they interact, but also what it means to have faith. Okay, and then we're going to use those two scenes to dive deeper. Okay, so that's kind of where we're going tonight. Anybody know what year this movie came out?
1979.
It's it's right there on the screen. It's a pop quiz, and the answers are on the screen. Yes, so and it's 2 hours. Yeah. So anyway, so this first scene is that they're running away from the Nazis, and we're just going to kind of pick it up mid-scene. And then we'll stop it, and then we'll talk about it for a little bit, okay? So be on the lookout for what you see and notice, because I want to hear about it. And I'll turn off the light right over here. All right, let's go, Amy.
We're going the wrong way. We have to get to Berlin.
Brody's this way.
My diary's in Berlin.
We don't need the diary, Dad. Marcus has the map.
There is more in the diary than just the map.
All right, Dad. Tell me.
He who finds the book must face the final challenge.
What final challenge?
3 devices of such lethal kind.
Booby traps?
Yes. But I found the clues that will safely take us through. In the Chronicles, it's an answer.
Well, what are they?
Can't you remember? I wrote them down in my diary so that I wouldn't have to remember.
Half the German army's on our tail, and you want me to go to Berlin? Into the lion's den?
Yes, the only thing that matters is the grave.
What about Marcus?
Marcus would agree with me.
2 selfless martyrs. Jesus Christ.
That's the last one. The quest for the Grail is not archaeology. It's a race against evil. If it is captured by the Nazis, the armies of darkness will march all over the face of the earth. Do you understand me? This is an obsession, Dad. I never understood it. Never. Neither did Mom. Yes, she did. Only too well. Unfortunately, she kept her illness from me. All I could do was mourn her.
All right. They're at a crossroads. Yes. All right. So what are some of the things that stood out to you in that scene between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery?
The fight of good against evil.
The fight of good against evil.
Struggle.
Because the Nazis were chasing Nazis bad, Indiana Jones good. Okay? What else stood out to you? Yes, ma'am?
Listening to our parents.
Listening to our parents.
2 hard-headed men.
Yes, yes. The nut does not fall too far from the tree, right? Somebody did y'all say something over here? Blasphemy, yeah. And so in that moment, Indiana Jones is probably 40 or 50 years old, but he wasn't a man at that point. His daddy put him in his place. You don't do that.
Treasure hunt versus a holy quest.
Say that again.
Treasure hunt versus a holy quest.
Ooh, what do you mean by that, Carol? Treasure hunt?
Well, Indiana Jones is looking for the money and the excitement of being the one to find the Holy Grail. His father is on a holy quest for Christ.
Ah, yeah, that's good. That's good. Lou?
I was thinking about after the slap, then the son brings up that the point about his mother never understood either. It's kind of like, you can do this to me, but I'm going to bring that back to you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. What else stood out to you? One of the many things, I love a lot of things about that scene, but one of the scenes that stands out to me is at the beginning of that scene when he puts the pole into the front wheel of the motorcycle and the motorcycle flips, which that was a pretty awesome explosion on that motorcycle right to flip. But then he looks over at his dad to get approval. Yeah, it's not good enough, right? Some of us have moms and dads who it's never good enough. Yeah. And maybe we're those parents. Okay. Anything else stand out to you?
I thought there was a little bit of symbolism with the lance going towards the motorcycle in that
Good.
scene.
Yeah, good. Okay. Yeah, that's good. I hadn't thought about it that way. That's good. Yeah, so that scene is about, I think, an hour into the movie. And so the next scene that we're going to see is toward the end of the movie. They have gone to wherever this holy quest leads them. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. And Sean Connery has gotten mortally wounded. So now Indiana Jones, who had some concerns about this whole quest, now he's like, okay, my dad's about to die. Even if I don't believe it, this is all I've got. I've got to lean into it, right? So he starts on this holy journey, and his dad somehow is kind of communicating with him. And so as we watch this next scene, I want you to be attentive to what themes kind of stand out to you, not just in the father-son relationship, but also in what Indiana Jones is having to wrestle with. Sometimes we go into faith willingly. Sometimes we're kind of forced into it. And maybe that'll make sense here in just a little bit. Amy, you feel like you're ready?
What number does it say? 147?
Well, it says 142. You got about 5 more minutes. Right. A little bit more. Right. Go back. Right there. That's good. Actually, go back just a little bit further. No, that's good. Just leave it. Nope. Netflix makes it a little bit more difficult to start and stop.
Only a blink from the lion's head. It is worth.
Can you turn up the volume, Amy?
Nobody can jump this. Indy! And you must hurry! Come quickly! It's a leap of faith. Come out. You must believe, boy. You must believe.
There you go. All right, what stands out to you in that scene? Okay, what stands out to you in that scene?
Well, the command of the Father
And what is the Father command?
is to believe.
You got to believe, boy.
Yep.
Yeah, it's life or death. You got to believe. What else stands out to you?
Leap of faith.
Leap of faith. Now, if you watch the Indiana Jones movies, Indiana Jones is not known for his deep faith.
No, he's not.
He's a scientist. He's like Carol said, it's a treasure hunt. And so, did he enter into faith willingly?
No.
Life circumstances just kind of
He had to do it.
forced him in there, right? What else stood out to you?
You can't see the way until you take the step.
Say that again. We want to make sure that's recorded.
You can't see the way until you take the step.
Ooh, you can't see the way until you take the step. We're going to look at that here in just a little bit. What else stood out to you?
Even after that first step, though, the journey is still perilous.
Yeah.
It's not a sure thing.
Oh, that's
It
right.
takes some work.
So even after the first step, the journey is still perilous. It still takes work and intentionality, right? Because he could have, without intentionality, he would have fallen off that bridge. I mean, he had to stay focused on one step at a time, or he could have fallen either way. One thing that stood out to me is when he got to the end of the bridge.
He showed the path for the rest of the people to follow.
Yeah, and he may not have realized he was doing that. It may have been self-preservation. This is to help remind me this is the way to go.
Waiting to go another way.
But others actually used it, and some used it for good, others used it for bad if y'all finish the movie. Because some of the people who were not people of faith, they were just looking for the treasure. They made it across because someone in faith took the first step. That'll preach. Okay, so what else stood out to you? Anything?
Well, I thought even though he took the step of faith, he still looked surprised that it actually
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think there's some deep parallels within us, right? Step out in faith, and then when it actually works, we go, what? I didn't think that was going to work. Well, I can't believe that. Because if it doesn't work, then we go, I knew that wasn't going to work. But I think you're very observant, and that's good. Okay, let's dig into some scriptures here. The first thing is, that there's no Holy Grail in the Bible. That's not a biblical concept. That idea actually didn't come around until about the 1100s. So if you're thumbing through your Bible index or you're putting Google search Holy Grail Bible, unless someone made a different version of the Bible, you're not going to see that in there. It's more of the King Arthur era tales of things. Okay, so I think even Sean Connery said, he said something about Arthur in one of the scenes. Okay, so the whole Holy Grail, Fountain of Youth stuff is not in there. So we can just go ahead and clean that off the slate. So, but what we're talking about here is we're talking about faith. And so I'd like for you to turn to, before we go to Hebrews chapter 11, let's actually go to Hebrews chapter 10. And I'd like for us to go to verses 32 through 39. Because in order for us to understand Hebrews 11, we got to understand the context. So let's go back just a little bit. Hebrews chapter 10. Now, Hebrews chapter 10, is it in Old Testament or New Testament? Yeah, anybody know who the author of Hebrews is? Tradition, Hebrew. Do you know what the Hebrew's favorite drink is? Tea or coffee, because Hebrews. Anyway, for traditional purposes, for the longest time, it was associated with Paul, that Paul wrote it. But over time, there's been some question about if Paul is the author, which doesn't take away from its significance. It's just, we're not really sure who the author is. Okay, but it's in the New Testament canon, has been that way for almost 2,000 years. So, if you start with verse 32, I'm going to read this first part because you're going to get a chance to read some stuff later. Okay, Hebrews chapter 10, starting with verse 32. Remember those earlier days after you had received the light, when you endured in a great conflict full of suffering. Okay, so just make sure we're on the same page here. The author of Hebrews is writing to a church, and a church is not brick and mortar, the church is the people. Okay, Hebrews is not written to the general population in some town called Hebrew. The Hebrews are God's actually chosen people. So these are Christians who were once Jewish. This is the primary audience or target. So he's writing to people who had a background in the Jewish faith who've been converted to Christianity. Okay, that's a big deal. So remember those earlier days after you had received the light, and the light is the light of Christ, the gospel. When you endured in a great conflict full of suffering, back in this day, just a little bit of background, people had to suffer for their faith. It was a big deal. Like, not just go through periods of being uncomfortable, but like bad things. 33, sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution. At other times, you stood side by side with those who were so treated. So it gives a little bit of explanation of that. You suffered along with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property because you knew that you yourselves had better and lasting possessions. Okay? As Christians, we know that our hope is not in what moth and rust will destroy, and not in the things of this world, but in the eternal hope of Jesus and sharing the good news and coming alongside other people. 35. So do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what He has promised. For in just a little while, He who is coming will come and not delay. That's reference to Jesus, second coming. But my righteous one will live by faith, and I take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back. So stand firm, be ready. But we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed, but to those who have faith and are saved. Okay, so we're talking about faith, and in these 7 verses, it's a great segue into what we're about to experience in Hebrews chapter 11. This is all about faith. So a couple of things in Hebrews chapter 10, just to make sure you got this. The writer is writing to the church, which has gone through a lot of trials and persecution. And the church is not brick and mortar, it's people, it's you and me. They don't have a church campus. They're meeting in people's homes, or they're meeting in secret, or they're meeting out in the road somewhere, and when they come across one another, maybe they draw an ichthus or a fish in the ground, and that's when they know, hey, this is someone these are my people here. And so they talk and converse. It's almost like the church in China today, or the church in Iraq, which is primarily led by women, by the way. You need to read that story. It's pretty phenomenal. And they don't do it because they have great buildings. They do it because God is a God of awe and transformation. So, they're talking about persecution and faith, and the writer is saying, look, this is a really big deal. Y'all stood firm. You've also come alongside people who may have been persecuted. So it's not just about what you've done, but you've also come alongside other people. This is what we do as Christians. And in fact, the Roman Empire, just as a side note, was really overturned through the transformation that took place through Christians actually living out their faith. That what made a difference in the Roman world was that we didn't just talk the talk like the pagans, but when everyone else left town and when everyone else left the sick and the least and the last and the lost, the Christians were the one that stayed around. They're the ones who went into the cities when there was great disease rampant, and we were known by how we loved one another, even those who were not within our fold. It's pretty cool. And the Roman Empire didn't have a response to that except to be awed by it because God was doing something. So, but there was also persecution that happened through that. But then at the end he said, but we do not belong to those who shrink back and are destroyed. So he's kind of putting the people he's talking to in context with other people of faith down through the ages. And that's when we go into Hebrews chapter 11, where he starts talking about the Faith Hall of Fame. Okay, in order for us to understand faith, if we just use ourselves as a model, we won't go very far. But there's people before us who have gone to great lengths that we can learn from. So in Hebrews chapter 11, I need someone to read the first 3 verses for me. Who would like to read the first 3 verses out loud for me? Okay, thanks, Kathy. Let me come over to you so people can hear you. Okay, Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 through 3.
Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain for what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible.
Okay, so verse 1 talks about what faith is. How is faith described in verse 1?
Confidence in what we hope for.
Faith is confidence in what we hope for. So let's go back to Indiana Jones. If faith is confidence in what we hope for, did he have faith that when he stepped out he would land on a bridge?
He had no idea what he was going to step on.
Yeah, I actually think he did have faith. I'm not saying he had a saving faith.
No, he had.
We'll talk about that. But he had faith and trust that he was going to step out. And faith is sometimes just hoping. Man, I hope there's something here. I have confidence that there is. Oh, and there is. Isn't that faith? Faith is the evidence. Faith is confidence in what?
I think hope is a big word in that sentence.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, from a Christian context, the people who are hearing this the first time, they were filtering that through Christ. I don't think Indiana Jones was. He wasn't saved by this faith spiritually. He was saved physically because he didn't plummet to the down to the ground. Okay?
What about his father's faith meaning something to him? It's kind of like when we say, if the children are brought up in the church, that word will not go void in them.
Sure.
So I was wondering if it was somehow drawing on his father's belief.
Could. Yeah. Well, and that's a great question, Lou, because that could be the case. Because at that point in the movie, Indiana Jones is kind of backed into a corner, isn't he? I mean, until his dad was shot, he was just kind of along for the ride. But then his dad was shot and the life was ebbing out of him, and he goes, okay, I've got to exercise faith even if I don't really have it. For his sake. Not for my sake. Not because of what Jesus has done for me, but he has faith and he trusts that there's something there, so I'm going to move forward. Does that make y'all agree with that? Okay. So look at verse 2. This is what the ancients were commended for. So this example or this definition of faith, confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see, the author is saying, and what we're talking about here, to the hearers of this, you are part of a long line of people who have exercised faith. You may not realize it, but you are. And if you look back at 3, it's by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. So that was kind of a segue into now verses 4 through 40, where he lays out the Faith Hall of Fame. How many of you have been to the Pro Football Hall of Fame? Anybody? In Canton, Ohio? Did you know we have somebody in the church who is responsible for sculpting, is it 30 of the busts? Close to 30? Yeah, Scott Myers. Scott Myers, the vet in town, he also sculpts. That's pretty cool. How many of you have been to a baseball Hall of Fame? Yeah, who are the people that are there?
Baseball players.
Yeah, but why are they there and others are not? What's the deal?
Voted into.
Voted in? Why?
Well, they were outstanding in their...
They were outstanding. They're examples to other kids and adults going, man, this is what a baseball player is. Anybody been to the Basketball Hall of Fame? I'm in it. I'm just kidding. But since you haven't been there, I'll tell you that I am. So, there's the Cowboy Hall of Fame. I think it's up in Oklahoma somewhere, right? Or Amarillo. I can't remember where it is. Anyway, Hall of Fames, they set apart people who are examples of that particular field. Like they've done outstanding work. These are people that you need to emulate and look at. They're the pillars or the giants of that particular area. Well, in Hebrews chapter 11, you really get a list of the giants here. So as these people are going through persecution and they understand, they're really being commended for the faith that they live, the author is trying to remind them, hey, don't forget, you're actually part of a long line. You're part of the long arc of God's history of how he's working through people. So in I keep on saying Acts. Hebrews chapter 11, starting in verse 4. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks even though he is dead. So somebody tell me a story about Abel. What do we know about Abel?
He got killed.
Yeah. Everybody turn to Genesis chapter 4. It's actually a pretty short story. Genesis is the first book of the Bible. Genesis chapter 4. Yeah. Genesis chapter 4. Genesis chapter 4. All right, Adam made love to his wife. You know God created sex, right?
Yeah.
We've kind of gone into a different route, but God created sex. And so, and all the parts that go with it. So Adam made love to his wife. That's a mind bender. But Adam made love to his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. Was this before or after they got tossed out of Eden?
Imagine that.
Yeah. Yep. So keep that in mind. This isn't Eden. This is after Eden. She said, with the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man. And later she gave birth to his brother Abel. So who's first, Cain or Abel?
Cain.
Yeah, Cain, firstborn. Now Abel, they're a little older now. Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil. One's a farmer, right? Another's a rancher. In the course of time, Cain, who is the oldest, brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of the flock. Just as an aside, when we talk about tithing and giving our first fruits, tithing isn't tipping. The principle of tithing actually comes from things like this that we see where people give the fattest portion, and that's not necessarily bad, the most sumptuous parts of the firstborn, the cream of the crop, as an offering. And in monetary ways, we talk about the tithe. Okay, tithe is 10%. Okay, if you give 10% to your waitress, you give 10% to the work of the Lord. Okay? And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very what? And his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, why are you so angry? Spouses, have you ever asked your other spouse that question? What's the matter with you? Why are you so angry? No? Just killers? All right. So, why are you so angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. So, once again, is this in Eden or outside of Eden? Sin is crouching at the door. I love that image. Man, isn't that taste today? Now, Cain said to his brother Abel, little brother, let's go out to the field. While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? Do you think the Lord didn't know already?
He knew.
Yep. Like when you get onto your kids and you go, what happened? And you know what happened. And maybe just like a child, Cain said, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Kind of getting a little sass. And the Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be restless wanderer on the earth. Okay. So the rest is about Cain. But if you go back to Hebrews chapter 11, one of the heroes of the faith was Abel. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did, and by faith he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, Abel still speaks even though he is dead. Now, if I were making a Hall of Fame, I don't know if I would begin with Abel. Because there's not much to that story, right? But somehow, through history, the author felt that that's actually a great starting point. So I don't necessarily understand why he would pick Abel, but I'm going to go with it because I trust that there's a reason for it. I don't have to know the reason, but I trust that there is a reason. Okay? And then he goes on to say in Hebrews, once again, the Hall of Fame, by, verse 5, by faith Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commanded as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God. Now turn to Genesis chapter 5. While you're turning to Genesis chapter 5, I want to remind you in that scene where Indiana Jones stands before the abyss. Did y'all catch what he said? It's impossible to jump this chasm. Or it's impossible to jump this, no one can jump this far. I think that was intentionally written into the script because nothing is impossible for God. Okay? So, anybody ever heard of Enoch before? Yeah. Has anyone ever heard a sermon on Enoch? Carol has, yeah. Okay. So Enoch, if you go down to verse, let's see here. That's Enosh. Okay, I'm sorry. When 21. Verse, actually 18. When Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. How many of you look forward to living 162 years?
And becoming a father.
And becoming a father, yeah. Yeah. After he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Jared lived a total of 962 years, and then he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. And after he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. Anyone else know anything else about Enoch? We don't know the details. We just know that he was found faithful. I don't know the detail of every person in the Baseball Hall of Fame, but for some reason they were found to be worthy to be put in the Hall of Fame. I'll trust that with Enoch as well. So faith. So if you turn to Hebrews chapter 11, he starts hitting the highlights of people that we may have heard of. Verse 7, by faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark. That takes a lot of faith. By his faith he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is keeping with faith. Then verse 8, by faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as an inheritance, obeyed. Okay, Abraham didn't know what it was. He just felt compelled to do it, and so he obeyed God when God said, hey, I'm going to make you the father of many nations. Okay, so he goes on through that. Verse 13, all these people, he also talks about Sarah. Let me back up. Verse 9, by faith he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was unable to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. She considered God faithful who had made the promise. Now, if you know anything about Sarah, when she first heard that she was going to bear children, why did she laugh? It was absurd. that ain't going to happen. No way. And I love that in the scripture. It says she just laughed. That's ridiculous. That's not going to happen. But she's considered a pillar of the faith. By faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. And so from this one man, and he was as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. Go down to verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. That's a big deal. Abraham was an old man. Sarah was an old woman. They gave birth to the promise. And then God said, okay, you got to sacrifice. And Abraham stepped forward and did it. The one whom God had promised him. But he trusted. He who embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, is through Isaac. And get this, 19, Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. And he talks about Jacob and Esau and Joseph and Moses and on and on and on and on and on. So that's the Hebrews, that's the Faith Hall of Fame. So before we go to Luke 17, which is in the New Testament, what power or what purpose is there in our faith of looking back on those who have been great examples of faith? What's the point? Why do we do that? Why do we look back to help us move forward? For encouragement? There's nothing new under the sun. We're not the first ones to be in this rodeo. So other people who've gone through it do that. That's
history repeats itself.
Yeah, we can learn from those in the past, right? Yeah. Well, that's why it's really, really important. One of the things we talked about here at the church over the last 2 years or so is the strong need for some of our senior saints folks to be people who are encouraged and invited and welcomed to come alongside younger generations. The younger generations are longing for it.
And share the faith.
And share the faith. The older senior saints, you can learn something from the newer folks, but the newer folks can also learn a lot from you. You all are the ones that have walked the road before. You're the ones who've experienced life's ups and downs, and for some of you, faith is easy. Faith is a gift. Some of you exercise great faith, and it's just part of you. Others of you struggle with it. But somehow, some way, when one generation is connected to another, and we know that we are part of a continuing story, what a difference that makes. What a generational difference that makes. And what you have experienced is not wasted or gone into the vapor, but you pour into someone else. Don't you want to be a part of a church where one generation intentionally pours into another? And the expectation of the church is that you can do that, and you are wanted. We want you to do that.
I tell seniors that their mission, they're still not done. Their mission is to pray and share their story with God.
That's right. And one of the things that Pastor Randy said on Sunday, which I loved if you were here, is when he was talking to those who were born before 1960, how many of you were born before 1960? How many of you were born before 1970? Yeah, I'm about to. How many of you were born after 1970? Okay, 1, 2, 3. How many of you were born after 1980? 1990? Okay, all right. One of the things I loved about growing up at the church I grew up in at Couts, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I loved that when I went in, I had some of the older folks who would look out for me every Sunday. Oh. And they would come and say hi to me, and they poured into me. And one of the ushers, Leo Neely, was a Vietnam War vet. He was friends with our family. And I got to a certain age, about Caleb's age now, about 9 years old, almost 10. And I walked in one day after I'd done every Sunday before then. And he goes, "Hello, Wade." And he shook my hand, and it was, "Clint, shake my hand." It was kind of like that. It was like the limp noodle. I was 9 years old. And he goes, "What are you doing?" And I go, I don't know. And he goes, let me show you how to shake a hand. Because I was at that age now. Right? So if I shake your hand now, I'm going to try to squeeze the bones out of it. Okay, that's what he told. Give a firm handshake, right? I still remember that. That was, almost 40 years ago. Almost, not quite, but almost. But it's that generational piece. And senior saints, when we talk about the Faith Hall of Fame, why wouldn't we include you? We need you. And you're going to keep on hearing that we need you. And there's not a one of you that are disqualified from it. Not a one of you. But we need you because God's working through you. And if you disqualify yourself, that's not because God's disqualifying you or I'm disqualifying you. It's because you're stepping out of the game. And we need you to lean in. Okay. So Luke chapter 17. Let's go New Testament. Luke. As you're turning to Luke chapter 17, let me just add an addendum to what I just said. We're not only going to give you that encouragement and hopefully motivate you to do that, but we're going to give you the tools to learn how to mentor and pour into people, okay? We're not going to tell you need to do it. We're going to come alongside and help you do that because that may not have been an expectation around here before, but it is now. So we're going to come along and see if we can get this figured out, okay? Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 19. This is one of my favorite stories about faith. Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee, and as he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. Why would they stand at a distance? Yeah, leprosy was a bad deal. And if a Jewish person of faith got in contact with a leper, they were considered unclean. They were unworthy. Okay? And they were also traveling on the border between Samaria and Galilee. So not only were they dealing with lepers, but also some of them were probably Samaritans. And Jews and Samaritans didn't mix and mingle. Bad mojo. So verse 14, when he saw them, he said, go show yourselves to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a what? Yeah. Jesus asked, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? Then he said to him, rise and go. Your what has made you well? Yeah. Tell me about that story. What stands out to you about that?
It was a Samaritan. It was a Samaritan that came back to give praise.
It was a Samaritan, someone who didn't practice the Jewish faith, right? So the Samaritan, not the Jewish people who should have known better.
Yeah, they didn't come back.
They didn't come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the Samaritan was practicing faith not because he was told he needed to practice faith, but because out of thankfulness. I mean, you can almost liken that to if Indiana Jones was a Samaritan and his dad was a Jewish person. And the Samaritan went, I don't know if this works. And it worked. That may be a stretch, but that might be something akin to that. What else stands out to you about that story?
The 9 who didn't come back, their faith was in the ritual of the cleansing ritual,
Mm-hmm.
not in the faith of Christ.
Say that again.
The 9 that didn't come back, their faith was in the ritual of the cleansing ritual, not in the person of Christ.
Ooh, that's right. That's right. They were cleansed. If you're a leper and all of a sudden you're healed, man, what are you going to do? Man, that's a great question. What else stands out to you?
Faith can heal you.
Faith can heal you, yeah. Yeah. Faith is what made you well. And so I think I think that actually has two levels. There's one, that it didn't really take any faith. Let's see here. Jesus said, go and show yourselves to the priests, and as they went, they were cleansed. This is verse 14. It didn't say anything to he wasn't saying anything to the 10 about exercise faith. He said, go make yourselves, present yourself, and you will be cleansed. There was no faith that they had to exercise except just obey what Jesus said. Just go. So in one way, there wasn't really any faith exercised. The faith was exercised in the Samaritan who came. Yeah. That's huge. So what made him well, he was already made well along with the other 9 physically. But now what is Jesus talking about what's made him well? Faith has made what well?
Soul.
Yes, soul. The physical body will wear out. Everyone who was healed in the New Testament is dead. But what made him well was his spirit. All right, so 2 Corinthians, this is how we'll finish up. 2 Corinthians, it's after the 1 Corinthians in the New Testament. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7, and it's just one verse. And it's a super short verse. There might be one you just want to circle in your Bible or write somewhere and put on your bathroom mirror in the morning. Maybe you need to see it or have it in your car somewhere. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. I think it's one that we could all probably say together at the same time, even if we're reading from different translations. Let's all say it out loud. We actually might say it 2 times together. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. Read whatever translation you have in front of you. Okay? 1, 2, 3. For we live by faith, not by sight. One more time. For we live by faith, not by sight. What in the world does he mean?
Step off the lion's ledge.
Step off the lion's ledge. Yeah, so Indiana Jones, what did he see? Impossibility. No way. No one can make that jump. As Christians, we live by faith. Now, it doesn't mean you be a fool. But what it does mean is that you faithfully discern and trust. Okay? We live by faith, not by sight. We live by faith, not by sight. We live by faith, not by sight. And I think that's kind of something we need to remind ourselves or tell each other. You know, I've got a friend who's going through a really tough time, and all they can see right now is just what's in front of them. I mean, and to hear them tell about it, man, it is hardcore awful. I mean, every area of their life is just in chaos. And that's all they can see. Isn't that the way it is with most of us? You get an illness, that's all you can see. You lose a job, that's all you can see. You have a fight with your spouse over a long period of time, that's all you can see. And to be told again, like the ancients, that yes, what we see in front of us is troublesome and it's real, but we also live by faith and not by sight. We believe in faith. The same God who rolled that stone away on Easter morning is the same God who can roll the stone away in your marriage, and in your work, and in your health. That's not just pie in the sky, that's faith. Okay? So what did we learn about Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade tonight? And faith. What's one thing you're going to take away? What's resonating with you?
The faith brought him through.
Faith brought him through. Yeah. Anybody else?
The neat thing I saw was Indiana Jones never had faith in the Christian sense, but he had faith in his father, that his father had faith.
Yeah.
And to me, that was much better than the chapter Hall of Fame, because it just shows the power of if we believe that the others believe, that has power in itself that can carry us through.
No, that's true. That's a great point. That's a great point. That's just a confirmation of the important role that parents play. We model, and it's and also the Apostle Paul talked about it with people who were married to unbelieving spouses. I can't remember what. I think it's in one of his letters to the Corinthians. But he talks about the spouse who's married to an unbelieving spouse, and he says, "Look, you are grace to them. Don't lose hope. Don't lose hope. Because you had Christians who were marrying Gentiles and there was kind of inbreeding, so to speak. So you got a believer married to an unbeliever. And there were some who thought, well, just drop the unbeliever because you're justified. And Paul was like, no, don't. You have no idea what influence you make in saving faith for this person. By your faith, this person can be saved in some way. So keep on keeping on. And in that same tone, it can be talked about with our kids who we may feel are unbelieving, but they're still watching. We hope and trust. We have confidence in that which we cannot see. That's faith. Good point. Anybody want the final word? Okay, Evelyn, thank you for praying us out tonight. I have confidence in what I have not yet seen. Thank you, Evelyn.
Dear Heavenly Father, we appreciate the time that we gather together and listen and hear God's Word. May we pray that we live what God wills us to live. Keep us in His faith. Keep faith in us and what we do, that we do what God directs us to do. Thank you for this day and every day that we have. And I pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you. All right, we have one more class next week, and then we'll finish up strong. As you leave tonight, if you haven't signed in, or even if your name's not on there, write your name on there, and we'll turn it in. And if you have any questions or comments about anything, I'm going to hang around for a little bit. Love to visit with you. Thanks for being here. It's going to be in an email. Or do you want them right now?
No. Okay.
I'll send an email tomorrow.
Old church